once you get them talking, they like to talk about themselves, right? And then they like to talk about their emotion in the deal. And sometimes they'll give you the information that you need.
How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Shawn and Matt Show. My name is Matt. That is Shawn, and welcome to our show, Shawn. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to actually negotiate and get what you want. We are coming to you live from the new studio. So if you're watching on YouTube, it might be a little bit different. Hopefully, it's an improvement. If you're listening to us, hopefully there's no difference in the sound quality. If anything, it might be better sound quality.
I think so. Yeah, we're pretty quiet down here.
Yeah. So, Shawn, happy Wednesday, February 5th to you. It is Super Bowl week, and I've never felt less excited about the Super Bowl. I don't know if it's just because I'm getting old or if it's just two teams that I'm just tired and sick of. I'm over the Commanders losing to the Eagles. It's not that. But I just don't want to watch Jalen Hurts be carried in for 1-yard touchdowns. I don't want to watch, Travis and Kelsey and Taylor and Patrick Mahomes, who I like all of them.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of just over it.
Yeah.
I'm sick of it.
I was not rooting for Kansas City at all. I was just, in one regard, you're like, oh, this has never happened before. But at the same time, it's like, all right, we just played this last year. I don't want to see it again. I want to see something new. I was really going for Buffalo and that.
Yeah. I hope Kansas City wins. I'm not like a big hater of greatness.
Yeah.
I'm just like tired.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. But the biggest sports news this week was Luka Doncic being traded from, this would be like Jaromir Jagr, Wayne Gretzky, Jaromir Jagr like being traded from the Pens.
It's insane.
And how that relates to real estate is that there was a rumor that he was under contract or buying a $15 million house in Dallas, and then the team just shipped him out of town. Now, I did some digging, and according to the Dallas Morning News Star, whatever the paper is down there, apparently he's under contract, or he hadn't quite purchased it yet, and I think he's still able to back out. But could you imagine, and I think the price was wrong too, but could you imagine like going under contract for like a $10 million house, and then your job ships you to California?
Amazing in so many levels. One, can he get out? I'm sure he has contingencies in that contract, but at the same time, it affects so many people, right? The seller, the agents thinking they're going to finally get paid on this person that he's showing forever, and it was a big paycheck. Imagine that being waved in front of your hand, and then boom.
If
gone.
you're the buyer's agent, you'd be so bitter.
Because he's moving out.
And then your client's out of town.
Gone.
He's gone. But I did some calculations. So Luka's making, how much do you think he's making this year? Starts with a 4.
48 million.
43 million.
43 million.
And
That's
so,
insane.
like, if you're buying a $15 million house, which it wasn't 15, there were some reports, I think it was lower than that. That'd be the equivalent of, like, if you made $200,000 a year and were buying, like, a $67,000 house. But in all honesty, there's only, like, 5 or 10 people in the sports world that should be buying, like, a $10 million house. It's like LeBron, it's Mahomes, it's Kelsey. If you're just, an above average or great athlete on like these 4-year deals, it really doesn't make sense to buy these like $8 million properties for a couple of years unless you just want to live that lifestyle and know that you're just going to lose a bunch of money when you sell it.
Yeah, and the other thing to think about is the agents of those people are taking so much money, the taxes. So yeah, he's making $42 million, $43 million, but he's actually pulling in about half of that when it all comes down to it. So you think it's, holy cow, $43 million. Well, cut that down to 22, and then see, all right, now he's buying a $15 million house. That's a little, more in the realm. You know what I mean? Like, so that's the one thing about sports is like everybody thinks that they're making all this money, but there's so many other people making that money, especially the government, as we like to talk about.
All right, Shawn, let's get into the article. It comes to us from the Wall Street Journal, How to Negotiate a Real Estate Deal and Actually Get What You Want. Okay, so everyone loves talking about negotiating. I've never met a buyer who, like, buyers, when they say what they want, they're always like, I want a fierce negotiator.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I want an agent that like can negotiate to and like beat the other agent over the head, and they're just a tough. No one says, oh, I just want like a passive negotiator. I just want a soft. Everyone wants a good negotiator, but how do you become a good, like, how are you a good negotiator? So Wall Street Journal has a report from LendingTree.com that said 63% of buyers have successfully negotiated the home price, while 38% negotiated closing costs, and about 1/3 negotiate the sellers to pay for repair, something that, pretty much every buyer would want. And it goes into a couple different cases of negotiating, and it gives a couple tips. First of all, on one of the cases, they went through a luxury condo in southern Florida where they said the unit was listed for $14.9 million, but the buyer made an initial lowball offer of $13.25. So these numbers are probably just in the stratosphere for most people, right? Like $15 million versus $13.25. But imagine there was a house for $500,000 and someone put an offer in for $440,000. To me, that's not a lowball offer.
Yeah.
So I think the first thing to talk about is like, what is a lowball offer? Who defines a lowball offer? And if one person's lowball offer is another person's like competitive offer, I think we need to rethink and reposition ourselves on what we believe a lowball offer is.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It depends on the market. It depends on so many factors of what you're going to write this contract out and what somebody else may perceive as a lowball offer. And, I've written $10,000 under an asking price one time, and they go, oh, it's so low. Well, it depends on context, right? And so if it's like the first weekend on the market and you come in $10,000 low on a $500,000 place, it might be a lowball offer because they're like, no, we're taking, this is a competitive market. We're taking asking price or above. So you have to take it all in context. When it comes down to this, when you're talking huge numbers like this, I've never negotiated a $15 million deal, $10 million deal. To me, $13 million off of 15 isn't that big of a deal. I think we can make a deal out of this. And what you want to be cognizant of is, number one, I would say, is communication, right? I think that's our number one thing that we have to think about when we are negotiating a deal. I think the first thing that you have to think about is communication between agents. If you have a good rapport going with the agent, you can get a lot of information out of them. Just let them talk. Let them go through because you know what? They might have been sitting on this listing for months and they're just like, oh, I'm so tired. I just need an offer. Just send me an offer, right? Like, we get a lot of information from agents, which maybe they shouldn't be disclosing to us. And that will give us our first lead on how to react and how this negotiation is going to go. So I think, number one, communication.
Yeah, and this agent, Mark Duchon with Corcoran Group in Miami Beach, did exactly what you were saying. Him and the seller had a conversation, and one of them thought it was a low offer. I think they were both surprised that it was much lower than recent comps. And the agent pretty much said, hey, listen, I know it's lower. There's not many transactions in this price point. Let's keep this alive and just give them the opportunity to come up, right? And so they did that. They countered. They came a little bit lower, and the buyer just kept making bigger steps up and up, and then they eventually closed at 14.3. So they got the buyer up more than $100,000, more than $1 million, right?
Yeah,
from 13.25 to 14.3. So it just goes to show that if you just keep the door open, and maybe the seller had a little more leverage there, and maybe the buyer was a little more emotionally invested, then the article leads on. But it just goes to show that if you instantly get offended after, sitting on the market for months and months and months, you may have just, shot yourself in the foot with a potential deal.
Guys, if you're in real estate, this is business, right? You can't get offended by an offer. And that's why I, as a listing agent, I'm always like, thank you for the offer. I'll present it to my clients and I'll let you know what they feel. And I have been able to get deals done that I thought, man, I don't think I'm ever going to get this done. But you present it, you act like, hey, thank you, be appreciative of this, and, throw another offer, a counter offer out there. You never know what you're going to get done. There's so many people are like, oh, that's a horrible offer. No, just write it again or whatever. Well, you know what? Sometimes being that abrupt kills it. But if you would just be nice about it and say, hey, thank you. And, my client thinks this is a little low, and this is his counter offer. Take it for what it is, and you'd be surprised at what you can get done. I've had it. People just take it right there because certain things that you can say in that negotiation about, oh, we have showings tomorrow. We have these showings set up. Somebody flying in from X to see the house tomorrow. And these are truths that I'm telling agents. And, they take that back to their client, and their client might feel that angst like, you know what, I just got to get this deal done. I was trying to play a game, but now we realize we're not going to get that game done. So let's just sign the deal. And you'd be surprised. So in my opinion, when you get an offer, be thankful for that offer and just present it to your client.
The article also quotes Leonard Steinberg from Compass. This guy I see quoted in like every single outlet. He's a broker in New York City. I got to meet this guy sometime.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of good things to say. Like every time he posts a comment, I'm like, oh man, I actually agree with this. But he's talking about being careful. Like, don't be afraid of what to ask for if you really want it, but be careful of how you phrase it. So you don't really want to start off by giving ultimatums of like, you have to include the furniture or else we won't get this done. He suggests something like, try rephrasing along the lines of, would you consider including the furniture in the sales price, just to get that conversation going, which brings me to kind of a real life example of this condo I have in DC coming up for sales. It's 1.5, and the owner has, I would say, a lot of nice, usable furniture. It's nothing extravagant, but it's not like cheap IKEA crap either. And she says, hey, we can include all these as add-ons. And so I'm trying to figure out if, like, when to play that card of like, oh yeah, you can have this really nice armoire or this really nice buffet or chest or whatnot. I'm almost thinking it'd be best just to say everything can be included if you'd like, as like a goodwill, nature. Or should I kind of rephrase it and say, hey, we can throw in this thing if you like for an extra $1,000. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, typically I like to do it after the fact. I mean, there are some people that say, hey, all this furniture, like I just want to sell this with the furniture. And what I tell people in that regard is like, that's a little harder because that's a narrowed buyer pool. And when you're saying, oh, furniture conveys with this price, well, then what's the actual price with all this furniture in there, right? Or with it out? Like if the buyer doesn't want it, then where's the price? So I like to price the property for the property, and then the furniture, hey, if you want all the furniture, it's $10,000. And remember, if you're doing that, if you're negotiating furniture sale on top of a contract, it can't be in the contract, right? Because a lender's going to strike it from you.
What?
Because
say that again.
So furniture is personal property. If you write it in the contract and you're saying, I want $10,000 of furniture inside the property, a lender's going to look at that and say, listen, you need to put this on a separate bill of sale, because we can't have it in the contract, because what they're appraising is the property.
So you can't finance a couch,
correct,
through the lender.
Right. So you want to be careful of that and make sure that you're putting it off to the side. And you can charge whatever you want for that furniture, but it's got to be on a separate bill of sale. So make sure you're doing that.
But if I say, hey, the couch, the TV, and the bed convey as a part of the sale,
even that could be difficult to get past.
Well, when does it become a fixture? So if it's a fixture, it's fine. But if it's like a chair,
fixture, it's fine.
The dining room chair conveys, and then the lender's
at no other value. If you put it in as no value, because there's a line in the contract where you can put it at no value, then that's fine.
I think
but
that's
if you're
the key
putting
word.
A value to it, then the lender's going to say no, because the appraiser's going, and he's only that appraiser's only appraising the value of the property, not the value of the personal property.
He's not looking at a chair.
Chairs and couches. He doesn't know what this
antique rodeo show. Antique rodeo show. Like, oh, what is the value of this chair?
Yeah, so you have to be careful when you're negotiating those types of items in contracts. It's fine to do it. Just put it on the side, separate bill of sale. You're not sending that particular thing to the lender. The lender does not want to see it.
So I'm thinking I'm just going to do this as goodwill. Like, hey, like maybe have like a little placard and stick it. I'm not going to stick 50 placards in the condo, but I'll just say, hey, these are the items that can convey. Maybe I'll just say at no additional value. But I feel like there's a lot to be said about building that goodwill, and maybe like subtly reminding the buyer's agent that we're giving you this for free throughout the transaction. And saying almost like, yes, because we're giving you this for free, we just want to, like, I don't know, just remember that throughout the transaction.
Well, yeah, because listen, when you're negotiating home inspection items later, you could be like, well, I'm giving you $1,000 piece of furniture, or you wait a little bit until that negotiation is going through,
right?
And you wait for that negotiation of the home inspection, and you could say, all right, well, how about instead of the $1,000, I just give you the couch, or you go cool with that, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. So you're saving yourself money by negotiating in the furniture that they might want. So I would use that as a tool after the fact, that say it's available. Maybe try to get through those negotiations. But as we're talking about the home inspection items, I want to tell, so there's a lot of times when we go under contract and then our clients feel empowered and they're like, I'm gonna get them on this home inspection. I'm just gonna crush them, right? And there are many times when I have to tell my clients, I'm like, listen, this isn't a renegotiation of the contract terms. This is a negotiation of the home inspection items only and what they're going to cost, right? So you're not trying to take $40,000 off the price because of a bad HVAC system, right? HVAC system might be $10,000 or $6,000 or whatever you're negotiating, right? But what I tell my clients is like, listen, be respectful and be logical about your negotiation terms and money, because at this point, that seller is going to start taking things, personally. And when they start taking it personally, you don't get any movement from them. They're like, you know what? You pissed me off. I'm done negotiating. You either take the house or not. And I've had that happen many times when my clients are like, let's go hard on this negotiation. Let's ask for $20,000, blah, blah, blah. I've definitely gotten it sometimes. You just have to feel your way through this process. But a lot of times I'll say to my clients, listen, I think this is worth X. We're asking for a credit. The HVAC system could work another year. Let's ask for this many $1,000 to negotiate that item so that when you replace it, you have some money towards it. But going all buck wild all the time, a lot of times that negotiation doesn't go well and you end up getting very little or nothing out of that deal. So again, it's about communication. It's about feeling things out. And you have to tell your clients these things like, listen, I'm feeling, and we can feel this stuff. Like we can tell when an agent's like, dude, they're pissed, right? They're not going to do it. So on the other side, you have to be like, all right, just wade through that water carefully. Be careful because it could blow up in your face and you could get nothing. And are you willing to take it for no money on that home inspection negotiation?
It's funny you bring that up. I'm working on something right now where we're asking for about $3,100. It's a large house. A lot came on, right? There were like 40 or 50 inspection items. And so we pulled the safety item. Things are like leaking and receptacles aren't working. There's safety issues. And so we wanted to be very conscientious about picking those things that one would reasonably consider to be in working order of a house.
Yeah.
Damaged trim and whatnot, fine, whatever. And so we added that up. I said 3150, whatever. How does this look to you? And then my client goes, oh, well, what about the water heater? Now, when we toured the house, the water heater is probably original to the house, like 25 years old. Like the thing is on its last life. Like it's beyond its last life. It probably has a year or two left. And I pointed that out when I showed them the house. I said, look at this corrosion, budget for a new water heater. And they said, okay. And then we did the home inspection and the inspector goes, okay, you're going to need a new water heater. It's like, yeah, we know that. And then when we added it up, they go, oh, well, how about the water heater? What would that cost? I was like, well, that'd probably be with the materials and install like $3,500, which would bring our total ask to like $6,600. And then they go, okay, well, is that too much to ask? And I said, it could be. We knew the water heater was older when we made the offer. So asking for that on top of the repair list might push them to say no to everything. I think $3,150 is a solid ask. We can always try to ask for more if you're comfortable with the risk.
Yeah.
And so now I'm giving them two options. I haven't heard back on what maybe the seller says no to everything. Maybe the seller agrees to $3,150, comes back at something in the middle. But we're starting to, when we reach a little bit, even if it is reasonable, like the amount of corrosion on there, like the bottom of the water heater looked like a penny. It's just so like corroded.
It's time to go.
You can't just get new appliances, right? You're buying the appliance in there, and if the appliance is in working order, the seller's not going to pay to upgrade and renovate your house.
Correct. And it's funny when I get into the negotiations of home inspections, sometimes the agents will like, well, you toured the property, you saw that the floors were scratched, or you saw that the water heater was corroded, and we priced it in. Well, okay, well, did you disclose that to me, or was it for me to find out, right? And so, yeah, that could go both ways as well. And I've had that happen as well, where a client or the agent will say, well, you saw it, it was there, you knew that was it, and that's what we negotiated. And I was like, well, not necessarily, so yes, on one hand, you might have seen it and you might have negotiated it. Maybe your clients did negotiate that in the price and they were thinking of it in the price. But then the double dip could present a problem. And that's where you kind of want to be careful on that ask.
Ultimately, it comes down to who cares least. If the sellers don't care and maybe they get emotional, they'll just say, oh, no, just take it or leave it. We don't care. We're fine going back on the market. Where if the buyers are like, yeah, we don't care. If they don't give this to us, we're walking. Mm-hmm. That's oftentimes who has the upper hand. in negotiating is whoever has the ability to walk away from the deal.
Yeah, 100%. There's been times that I was like, listen, I don't think you should, do this or whatever, but they didn't care. And so I just went back and I said, these are their terms, man. They're walking away if they don't get it. And guess what? We got the deal, right? So I think the number one thing, one and two is communication, not only with your agent, but number two, listen to your client. Like that's the main thing. You have to be able to listen to your client to find out what they actually want, where their emotions are. This is a very emotional process. And, there have been times where I'm always going for like, I want to get the best deal for my clients. I want to get, negotiate this thing down. And I'm going kind of hardcore in my mind. But then I talk to them and they're like, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah, well, I think most of the people watching out there are home buyers and home sellers. And so it's tough because how do you as a home buyer negotiate with, I would say, a third party, right? Because you're playing telephone through your agent. Are you confident enough that everything that you're describing will be described perfectly and in the right tonality by your agent to the other agent? And so you lose control as a home buyer during that process. And so that's why it's very important to be on the same. You almost have to convince two people at the same time, right? You have to convince your agent, because if you tell your agent, hey, we're asking for $10,000, here's why. And the agent goes, oh, well, I don't think we're going to get it, but I'll ask anyways. Like, how good of a job are they going to do, like, asking for that? Now, if they give you the pros and the cons of the 10,000 and they say, hey, the likelihood is very low, but I'm going to do everything I can, maybe that's a different story. But if there's a disconnect between you and your agent, I mean, you're going to have a false start. You're never even going to have a chance.
100%. Agents matter, and if you're not communicating with your agent and letting them know exactly how you feel on these things, there's going to be a miscommunication on the other side. And sometimes that agent might feel really weird to ask for something because, it's not out of their norm, right? And so that's not going to do you any good when you actually want it. So you have to be on the same team, basically. If your buyer agent isn't on your team to negotiate these items, but at the same time, be receptive of what they're telling you, because they've been in this business for a while. They've done hundreds of negotiations. Matt and I have done hundreds and hundreds of negotiations. Everyone is different, but we can see signs of how things typically go. And that's what we share to people is like, listen, I've been in this situation before and this is how it ended up. It's up to you if you want me to push or if you want me to pull back. And, I think explanation is good, is key too. So if you're negotiating, say that $10,000, well, I have to have numbers to get to that $10,000. So a lot of times what I'll do is, all right, and keep in mind, like we're talking about home inspection negotiations. This is kind of where I'm going with this, but you can negotiate the seller to fix certain items, or you can negotiate a credit, or both, right? So you could have, all right, I want you to fix A, B, and C, and then I want $5,000 for D, E, F, and G, right? So that's the key. You have to be pushing for the certain things that you want. And, those negotiations can go sour very quickly. But it's important that so when I come up with a number, right, and say my clients want $5,000, well, I'm adding up, all right, the HVAC system needs cleaned or whatever. All right, that might be $350 to $500, right? There's a leak in wherever, right? And so $350, $250, whatever. And we're coming up with a number so that they can itemize and see in their mind what we believe these things are going to cost, so that they can, grasp it in their mind that, all right, that is a pretty reasonable ask. Or they'll say, well, you know what? I'm not willing to fix these items. I don't care, so I'm striking it. So it goes back and forth. But in the end, the seller always wants, not always, but typically wants the buyer to feel comfortable. They'll do certain things to make that buyer feel comfortable. But once you piss them off, man, that emotion gets in. And remember that emotion is big in contracts. And especially when you're selling a home and a personal item of your soul, your family, right? We are psychologists. Like, we talk people off ledges. We have to convince people to go certain ways to get deals done, because a lot of times emotion gets in there and they want to kill a deal. And I'm like, listen, there's no one else right now. Do you want to take $10,000 less later, or $20,000, or take that risk of going back on the market because of a $5,000 item? Maybe you do. Maybe you want to test that market, but a lot of times you're going to get less than you are right now. So just be happy with what you got, get over the emotions, and let's move forward.
In this most recent negotiation, we said, listen, we'll take the $3,550 if you want to fix these things, for cheaper, for whatever it costs. we're fine too. Like, we don't care either way. We just want the things not leaking. And part of it's establishing the relationship with the agent beforehand. So, I'm texting him when we finish up with the home inspection because the house is occupied, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't want to be the listing agent having to text the buyer like, hey, have you finished yet? Have you finished yet? So like, hey, I'm going to have you this contract at the latest by, tomorrow morning. Sure enough, I have it by tomorrow morning. So I'm doing all the things to build all the goodwill. And the article finished up by saying, especially in a tight real estate market, if you approach the negotiation as a win-lose proposition, it'll make it a lot easier for someone to reject your offer outright. But if you're more collaborative, if you establish a relationship, it's more likely both sides can work together through the problem. Now, a lot of people think you just need to bulldoze the other agent, and that shuts down the negotiation oftentimes more often than it'll win the negotiation.
100%. We all know the bulldoze agents, right? We've run into them.
No one wants to work with those people.
No one wants to work with you, dude. Stop bulldozing. I'm telling you, you think it works, it doesn't work. I'm just like, I already know who you are. I know how you're going to come and approach me, and I already know my tactic to negotiate against you.
I love that.
Happen.
I love that agent where it was an agent in our group, and they said they're working with kind of a difficult listing agent, but when that listing agent is the buyer's agent, like they're the best buyer's agent in the world. They're I shouldn't say that. I should say that buyer's agent, will call you every 10 minutes and demand an update. But when you're the buyer's agent and they're the listing agent, they won't pick up their phone for anything.
Completely
and
different
that
story.
would drive me out of my mind.
It drives me crazy. There's agents like that all the time. I deal with them. Most agents are pretty receptive and pretty good and easy to work with. And that's what we want, is like somebody that's easy to work with. When you get the bulldozer, man, I just become the excavator. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pushing against it. I'm digging a hole so you fall into it, because, nothing rubs me the wrong way more than trying to be a jerk about things. I'm a positive person. I always look at the positives of things, and I always think, I'm going to get this damn deal done. I'm going to get it done. I don't know how, but I'm going to get it done. And that's the way I approach my own purchases. And, I have emotion in these, but at the same time, I know what my max is. And I'm like, listen, I'm not going over X for this property. And that's what I said. And in the end, I ended up getting it for that amount, right? And it was a big, big amount off of the ask price. But you have to know in your mind how your client wants you to approach that, number one. And then if it's a bulldozer, I'm pushing back on that. I can't stand it.
And I think there's a big difference between like being nice and being a good negotiator.
Correct.
It's not like, oh, pretty please, will you come down on price? No. I mean, that's going to give the other agent every opportunity to say no to you. It's more building your case of why this is such a fantastic deal for both sides, and that you want to move forward that way, as opposed to just like, oh, please, I'm reasonable, please.
Yeah. Well, another thing I'll say is you never know where that agent is in their career, how many things they've negotiated. Yeah, they might work on a team. It might look like they've negotiated a lot of deals, but I can tell right away pretty much if they're a newbie or not. And what I'll say as an agent is just listen. Let them talk. Listen. You will get so much information out of them if you just let them talk. Maybe ask the right probing questions, and honestly, become friendly with them. Talk about something just like I talk to anybody at an open house, right? I try to find a crack. I try to find a way in to talking to you as a human being, right? If we can then, be on the same level as a human being, whether it's an open house lead or somebody on the street or an agent, I want to find that commonality first and then move towards the negotiations. And you'll find that once you get them talking, they like to talk about themselves, right? And then they like to talk about their emotion in the deal. And sometimes they'll give you the information that you need so that you can pass that on. And I'm like, listen, I've used this many times where I go back to my client. I'm like, listen, I think by the talk that I just had, I think we can get X, Y, and Z. And then that's the way we approach it. So it's really important to listen, talk to those agents, get as much information as you can. And if you're a good agent, you're keeping your lips shut.
I think there was a time back in like 2019 where in multiple offer scenarios, I'd go on Instagram and I'd find the listing agent, I'd follow them, then I'd like their last 50 posts. Yeah. And so they're looking at 10 offers, and then they sign on to Instagram and they see one person has just liked 50 things. I'm sure it's probably like super weird, but I'm trying to do everything I can to stand out for my client.
Absolutely. And that's another thing. In the negotiations of a multiple contract situation, you want to be the squeaky wheel in a way that, hey, what can I do to win this? Tell me, give me some information.
Like, who's your preferred title company?
Do everything you can. If there's 10 contracts, man, you got 1 in 10 shot to do this. I'm working my butt off to try to find it. And honestly, sometimes you're limited at what your client's willing to do. But at the same time, I'm calling, I'm saying, hey, here's my offer. My offer is 1 PDF again, right? It's nice and clean. I show in the email what exactly my terms are. I'm calling them. I'm saying, hey, how many offers do you have? And then maybe as I get more information, I'm updating that offer. Maybe I do need to go higher in that escalation clause. Maybe I do, and in this industry, in this area, you better come in non-contingent if you're competing or you're not going to win. That's basically, in that inside the beltway kind of mindset. A lot of times if you're contingent, you're not getting it. And so on one side, you have to prepare your clients for that. But on the other side, you're communicating with that agent to try to get as much information and try to win that deal for your clients because you don't want to go back into it. And then the psychology comes back in. Your client loses a deal and they're like devastated, right? And now you have to start all over again. So if you can minimize that devastation quickly, you're going to have a better chance. And, there's clients that lose 5, 6, 7 offers. And then they start getting used to it. And they're like, all right, just waive everything. Go $70,000 above ask and let's see what happens, right?
Well, you may lose it on Tuesday and then your dream house comes up again on Thursday.
Yeah.
So there's like a quick 48-hour turnaround time between those two emotional roller coasters.
Right. And you know what? Sometimes people pull out of contracts. So if you're second or you're third and you're nice to that agent, guess who's going to get the call back? That nice agent. You're like, hey, these, and I've done this, right? I've gone back to agents and I'm like, hey, listen, this fell out. If you give me this right now, I will not go back on the market, right? So I know what that other offer was at. I'm going to go back to this other agent that was really nice to me and say, hey, are your clients willing to come to this number with no contingencies? If so, we're not going to go back in the market. It's yours. It's a psychological, like, holy cow, this is our shot, right? And they'll take it.
I do like the selective ultimatum.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a time and a place to say, if you give me X, I will give you Y. And I think you use that sparingly, but in the right circumstances, it'll seal the deal. Now, I had a multiple offer scenario in Reston recently, priced at $750. Winners went above 800 non-contingent. We just couldn't compete with that.
Yeah.
And I was talking with my buyers, and they said, hey, well, is there any chance that they would back out? And I said, well, it's in an HOA. They still have the HOA contingency. And I said, what are the chances they pull out? It's 1 in 10,000. And he goes, so you're telling me there's a chance?
There's a chance,
There's
baby.
a chance. Not likely, but there's always a chance. Sometimes you see that if someone really escalates above, and then there's an HOA, they get cold feet, and then they back out, and then the listing agent could come back and say, hey, we don't want to go back on the market, but if you give me X, Y, and Z, the house is yours.
Yeah. I mean, and when we see people back out of contracts, that's usually when it's not a huge multiple situation, but it does happen. And I've been the beneficiary of this many times, and I've been the person that has to call back many times. So, these contracts can't fall out. People get cold feet. Like I said, it's a psychological game. It's a very emotional thing. So people get scared. It's a big purchase for everybody, especially those first-time home buyers. They're like, wait, we won? Wait, we beat out everybody else? We paid $100,000 more than their asking price? Some people are like, amazing. Other people are like, oh no.
We've made a huge mistake.
Oh no, right? And so you get that the next morning after they sleep on it. They're like, I'm really scared. I'm really scared. Well, you either have to talk them off a ledge as your agent, or you got to say, all right, well, if this is your choice, then you got to let it go. And it happens. It happens a lot. So again, it goes back to communication and being that good person to say, hey, I will do whatever I need to do to win this deal. If this comes back on the market, call me. We'll get it done.
Love it. Shawn, I think we could rap about negotiation for like hours.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is a good place to stop for the day. Drop a comment down below if you learned anything in this little negotiation tutorial. I don't want to call it a tutorial, just chat. Discussion.
Yeah.
Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you haven't already. And for Shawn and myself, thank you so much for watching. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Take care.